3 of 3. The door that remembers your name. The week after the desert shook my hand, everything happened at once in the way that slow tragedies always do. The bell moved with the nonchalance of a cat that's decided you're part of the furniture. The tiles around the inner ring woke in sequences that learned each other's accents. Our clocks grew shy again, minutes slipping their leashes and wandering off. The man with the mirror-proof face began to look tired, which I had previously believed to be against the rules. They told us the sponsor would be watching in person. The hallway learned new shoes. The canteen learned to hold its breath. We cleaned things that were already clean and labeled things that had been labeled, since the concept of labels was invented. I ironed my shirt at 3 in the morning, not because wrinkled cotton affects gravity fields, but because human dignity remembers itself in small rituals. I caught my reflection in the cheap glass and wondered how many versions of my face had negotiated with how many different rooms, and whether any of them had won. In the observation room, I took my place. My console recognized me with a little blush of pixels. The bell sat there, patient and immodest and glory-stupid. The director stood at the back with 2 people who had learned to be important in a very quiet way. The man with the mirror-proof face stood to my left and pretended to be background. Naomi, God help me, was on the maintenance crew, pushing a cart that carried fewer mops than it looked like and more certainty than any of us had earned. We began. The rings engaged. The room remembered its trick. The world leaned. The sound baptism laid its thread through us like a surgeon, with a miraculously steady hand. My console drew the familiar braid of node pressure and then, without asking, added a 4th line, a harmonic the machine had never volunteered before. It rose from the bass line like a well-rehearsed rumor. My hands hovered above the keys, suddenly reluctant to touch anything that might make the moment change its mind. "Hold," the director said softly. We held. The 5th line arrived, thinner, high, the outline of a doorway drawn so faintly you wonder if the architect doubts his pencil. The bell tipped, not to climb but to address the empty air the way a person turns toward a name. The floor beneath the support struts sighed, like tape beginning to play. The bolt did not perform. It understood it wasn't the main act anymore. It sat on the cart like a good student. The 6th line arrived. My ribcage became a listening device. The tiles around the inner ring woke in a pattern that wanted to be read left to right and top to bottom, and also like the spokes of a wheel, all at once. The symbols were verbs. The verbs agreed. There is a moment in every story where the threshold recognizes you. You can lie to yourself about what happens next, but the door keeps your original order on file. The bell did not lift. It suffered a change of address. The space around it learned a preference, and then the preference redrafted its lease. For the length of one human breath in hold, the machine was elsewhere. Not far. Not even laterally. Just an elsewhere that does not care about our map. It came back with a kindness I do not deserve. The room observed its own hands, astonished to find no blood. The sponsor said nothing, which is the language of sponsors. The director's smile was a small democracy that briefly worked. The man with the mirror-proof face allowed himself one sigh, and then confiscated it before anyone could hear. Again, the director said, "We did it again." This time, the bell stayed gone long enough for my console to wonder if it should keep drawing lines for a room without a patient. It returned with dust on its skin that our air did not know how to name. The dust sifted to the floor and arranged itself into a pattern I had seen once in the margins of an old physics paper that had been withdrawn before it was published. That paper had described a topology that eats its own tail and then politely spits it out cleaner. The dust formed a shape like a question mark that's afraid of sounding impolite. Then it was just dust again. The sponsor said carefully, "Congratulations." The word had learned to stand at attention. The director nodded as if she had just performed an uncomplicated dance routine correctly. They left. The room found itself alone with us and immediately let its shoulders drop. I should have gone home. I should have done what the director had asked and spent my life on a sentence that kept me fed and only a little sleepless. Instead, the thing I had been rehearsing since the first Wednesday caught up with me. I took the disposable phone to the ridge. I breathed a sky that knew my lungs by their first names. I sent a message to the number that had found me before. "When you're ready to hear it, I will tell the truth carefully." The reply was instant, which is how you know a conversation has already happened without you. "Tomorrow, noon." The diner where the coffee tastes like a dare. The diner had the good sense to be ugly. Cracked leather, napkin dispensers that had once been chrome, a pie case that contained both nostalgia and regret. The man who sat across from me wore a suit that tried to be invisible and failed because invisibility requires joylessness, and he had retained a sliver of glee. He did not introduce himself. He folded a paper napkin into a shape that might have been a dog if dogs were triangles. "Mr. Hale," he said, "we would like you to tell the story." "Which story?" "The kind that puts people in rooms who do not like rooms," he said. He glanced at the waitress as she refilled our cups and smiled as if she had just confirmed his favorite proof. "We're very good at secrecy. We're very bad at timing. If the wrong person tells your story first, the world will have the right questions for the wrong reasons. You want me to be the wrong person for the right reasons." He looked pleased. "You are excellent at arithmetic." "Naomi," I said. He held up a hand, palm like an oath. "Alive. Employed. Bored. That last part is our gift to her. What do you want the story to say?" "The truth," he said, and he meant it in the way people do when they are willing to cover one eye. But carefully. He sipped his coffee and grimaced and looked grateful to have been reminded he still had a mouth. We have spent decades playing the part of the man behind the curtain. We forgot that show only works if someone peeks. The plan was not complicated because the worst plans never are. I would record an account with enough details to smell like a receipt and enough gaps to keep the world from skipping to the end of the book. I would drift the story into a public place that didn't belong to anyone. I would agree to be disbelieved in a tone that would make some people angry enough to keep looking. The night before I did it, I went to the desert one more time because if you're going to ruin your life, you might as well say good night to the room you did it in. The wind had decided to be kind. The sky had decided not to. I watched a satellite move like a very slow decision. I was about to go home when the sound that isn't threaded my bones so quietly I thought I was remembering on purpose. The pearl widened. It did not greet me. It regarded me. "Hello," I said out loud, because sometimes a fool's courage is the only currency you can afford. "Nothing." Then a pressure through the air, gentle as knuckles knocking on a door that would open whether or not you answered. The ground under my feet did a thing I still cannot describe without lying. The desert presented me with a version of itself that included an extra possibility. For one breath, I was both here and somewhere that had the good manners to pretend I wasn't. I understood then that the bell wasn't a vehicle. It was a letter opener. It didn't take us through. It made it possible for through to notice we existed. And the thing on the other side wasn't a place and wasn't a person. It was a conversation that chose voices the way weather chooses trees. It was old. It was patient. It was bored with our bad questions and delighted by our rare good ones. It did not need us. It had noticed us anyway. The recording session took place in a room that had been rented to no one under a name that sounded like a saint, and a law firm had invented a child together. I sat before a camera that did not want to be a camera anymore. I said things I had promised not to say, and I said them as if I still meant my promises. I described rooms that do not like metaphors in terms so dry, they cracked my lips. I talked about a machine that edits the manners of space without touching its clothes. I told them about the bolt and the window and the way time becomes shy when it realizes it has competition. I did not say the word alien. I did not say element or isotope or hand scanners or the names of lakes that pretend not to have been noticed. I said we are not alone in the way we assumed we would be. I said, the door knows our names. I said, I am afraid and I am grateful. We put the file on a server that didn't exist. We let it be found by people who live to find things. The first responses were exactly the responses the world has rehearsed for everything: hoax, marketing, delusion, psyop, art. Some people who had been waiting their whole lives to be certain finally had a toy of uncertainty to play with. Some who build their identity out of disbelief found new ways to pretend they weren't listening while they listened. A handful of voices, the ones the conversation might have been waiting for, said, the verbs are different. We should look there. Work did not end. The sponsor brought more questions, and a promise that sounded like a threat that had practiced sounding like a promise. We tuned the rings. We found new harmonics. We discovered how to make the bolt admit to being bored. The machine obliged us with kindnesses so small they looked like forgiveness. The desert kept its job. I believe you want me to tell you there was a day when the bell lifted and went where we told it to, or that it cut a hole and beckoned, and we stepped through into a sky that tried on different colors just to see if we liked them. That would be a different myth. Ours is smaller and I think better. On a Thursday that will not be in any history book, we tuned the rings and the door opened not wide but politely, and we did not enter. We stood at the threshold and listened. The conversation on the other side did not speak in words or light. It spoke in if and then. It spoke in what if you stop pretending cause and effect is a marriage and let it be a long-distance relationship. It spoke in we don't do up and down the way you do, but we like your ambition. From it, a kind of weather rolled toward us, not wind, not heat, not anything that would remind you of the planet you think is your home. It smelled faintly of rain that knows how to fall sideways without being discouraged. It carried a feeling I did not recognize immediately and then did. The feeling you have in childhood when a door marked employees only is ajar and you are alone in a store and the world is daring you to find out if you're brave or just hungry. We closed the door. Carefully, with the respect you give to a thing that has already been too polite. The director exhaled for 30 seconds straight. The man with the mirror-proof face sat down for the first time in my presence and didn't apologize to the chair. Naomi, who had drifted somehow to the back of the observation room, wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist like she'd watched someone she loved change their mind about leaving. Why didn't we go through? I asked later, because hope is a habit I still couldn't quit. The director looked at me as if I'd asked the sky to take responsibility for its own weather. Because you don't step into a sentence when you've only learned the first clause, she said. Because sometimes the truth invites you to stand on the porch until you remember your manners. The aftermath has not ended. It will not not in a way the news cycle can make happy. There were hearings then, and there will be hearings later. There were leaks that misquoted us in exactly the ways we needed to be misquoted. There were men with certainty in their mouths and women with patience in their pens. There were budgets moved from columns. No one reads to columns, no one is allowed to. There were more Wednesdays. I live small now. I water plants that forgive me. I fix the hinge on a cabinet that is patient with my excuses. I see Naomi twice a week in a diner that has improved its coffee out of pity. We do not talk much about lakes that aren't there or rooms that remember us. We talk about fitted sheets sometimes, and whether the sky is a promise or a receipt. She keeps the coin with the false Latin in a drawer. Sometimes she sets it on the table between us, just to feel the temperature of a life we nearly lost. When the night is honest and the wind is sober, I drive to the ridge and let my bones wait for the stitch. Sometimes it comes, slow, generous, like a hand pressed to a window from the other side. Sometimes it doesn't, and that is its own kind of mercy. Either way, I have learned to be grateful for a truth that prefers to be a neighbor before it is a God. If you're listening to this as a voice poured into your room, I hope two things for you. First, that you are safe enough to be curious. Second, that you are brave enough to be careful. There is a way to tell the truth that doesn't break the door. There is a way to listen that doesn't mistake silence for absence. If the sky ever knocks, answer. But remember to wipe your feet. The desert keeps its own calendar. On it, today is the day when the rumor finally admits it's a map, and the map, shy and delighted, draws a small X where you are standing. Not because treasure waits under your boots, but because you have learned something that will make you hard to disappoint. We did not win. The bell did not save us. The conversation did not crown us with a cleverness we had not earned. We were noticed. We learned to notice back. That is enough for now. That is a door opening the width of a breath, and a hand you do not have to shake if you are not ready. When it is ready again, and it will be because patience is older than fear, you will feel it where your ribs remember their music. You will think, my God, the world has another room. And the world, kind and amused, will think back, child, I was always this big.